So, it's a new year, and a new year means I have a new opportunity to shout in your face about why I love Jimmy Olsen. See, I don't know if you followed the discourse, but it turns out there are a lot of people out there who don't think old Jimmy adds much value to the comics he's in. Comic books are a deadly serious medium after all, and Jimmy's just another goofy clinger-on from the Silver Age. Another obstacle standing in the way of real storytelling. Or is he? Sure, I think Jimmy's goofiness is a huge part of his appeal, but he also represents something bigger in my eyes. As a minor player in DC's universe, Jimmy is our conduit to a world of limitless potential. Somebody constantly striving to be more, to embody the good he sees in his pal Superman. But what happens when that mask of perfection is ripped away? What happens to us when we see just how imperfect and fallible our heroes really are? To countless readers, Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's All-Star Superman is a definitive high point for the character, showing a Superman at his most compassionate and powerful. But it's also a compelling tale of grief and acceptance, with the hero's feats of strength juxtaposed against his own growing insecurities. It's this dichotomy between myth and man that the creators would explore in a pivotal issue of the series, as the hero's faults boil over and leave his best pal as Earth's last line of defense. This is the story of All-Star Superman, and how Jimmy Olsen totally wrecked the Man of Steel to save him from himself. Nosy newsboy, courageous cub, plucky picture taker, steadfast sidekick, Jimmy Olsen. While not as iconic as his big blue pal, Jimmy has always held a special place in the larger mythology of Superman, acting as the reader's surrogate and offering a real, non-Batman human perspective on the Man of Steel. Unlike Lois Lane, who acts as a more pragmatic foil to the hero's earnestness, Jimmy is a devout believer in Superman and everything he stands for, doing your best to inspire hope in your own way. Unfortunately, this part of the character is often ignored, not helped by Jimmy's antics through the Silver Age, where he fell into a pretty repetitive cycle of getting superpowers, sucking at using them, and reverting back to normal in a few pages. Rinse and repeat for a few decades, and, well, you can see where this is going. But that all changed with Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely, and their 2005 magnum opus All-Star Superman, wherein the two sought to create the definitive tale for the Man of Steel and his supporting cast. In a comics landscape dominated by darker, grittier depictions, All-Star is a celebration of the camp majesty of the Silver Age, something that Morrison and Quitely would channel through issue 4 of the series, built around their own take on Jimmy Olsen.
Our Jimmy Olsen was a total rethink based on the aspects we both liked, while playing down the whole wet behind the ears cub reporter portrayal, which often cast Jimmy in the role of buffoon.
Morrison states,
I don't like victim Jimmy or dumb Jimmy, because those takes on the character don't make any sense in their context. It seemed more interesting to see what a young man would be like who could convincingly be Superman's pal, someone whose company Superman might actually enjoy. That meant making Jimmy a much bigger character, swaggering but disingenuous, innocent yet worldly, enthusiastic but not stupid.
In place of previous writers who saw the reporter's history as amusing artifacts of a bygone age, Morrison would use their everything is canon approach to dig even deeper into the character, crafting a Jimmy fully defined through his ever-shifting identity, changing personas like clothes as a part of his own column for the Daily Planet. It's worth mentioning that the context behind these choices has expanded since Morrison has come out as non-binary, with Jimmy's more fluid approach to identity closely mirroring their own, as Morrison would detail further in their book Super Gods.
When not under alien influence, Jimmy Olsen could barely stand to be himself for more than 5 pages, and maintained a much resorted to disguise kit in times of emergency. His life became a shifting parade of costume changes and reinventions of identity. I grew up with the idea of the disguise kit and the performance, the idea of both body and identity as a canvas. I was following in the footsteps of Jimmy Olsen. Olsen played in bands and so did I. Olsen was freewheeling and non-judgmental even in the 50s, and so was I. If it was cool with Superman's pal, it was A-OK with me.
This disguise kit mentality colors every panel of Jimmy's story, rendered in spectacular detail through Frank Whiteley's pencils. The reporter's apartment is covered floor to ceiling with relics of his past, like genie lamps from his less culturally sensitive days, a flamebird costume, and a lovely callback to everyone's favorite red-headed reptile. Just like his own Fortress of Solitude, Whiteley also uses Jimmy's outfit to highlight his adaptable nature, having the reporter don the Technicolor garb of the genius scientist Leo Quintum, another Renaissance man who's been inspired by Superman's deeds. In a medium dominated by perfect, unchanging icons, Morrison and Whiteley rework Jimmy's patchwork history into his own form of enlightenment, using his fluid identity to tap into the potential that Morrison sees inside all of us. And when one of comics' oldest icons is twisted into something else, it's that enlightenment that'll end up saving the Man of Steel. Since his creation in 1938, Superman has been seen as the ultimate utopian do-gooder, a being with enough strength, intelligence, and empathy to tackle the problems of the world head-on. It's this relentless optimism that would leave a lasting impression on Grant Morrison, comforting them as they grew up through the Cold War and inspiring them to start making comics of their own. Morrison would continue to explore the Superman archetype across their career, heightening the character and his contemporaries into godlike status through books like 1996's JLA. However, by the time the writer had begun developing All-Star, their relationship to Superman had undergone a major shift, most directly influenced by the passing of their father in 2004.
My father was, for me, a genuine superhero,
The author states.
He was always looking to improve somebody's life while maybe neglecting what was going on back home. That was his kryptonite. But I only saw that later. I think that's why people think of All-Star Superman as a bit more Silver Age in the sense of trying to do new, modern, real human stories, but on a giant scale. Superman can be as powerful as you like, but his heart can be broken, and that's why it doesn't matter if he can throw planets. The emotional stories are always the big thing with Superman.
Following the Man of Steel after he receives a fatal dose of solar radiation, All-Star sees a Superman that's more powerful, intelligent, and empathic than ever before. But while the hero's new abilities let him accomplish countless new feats, they still leave him unable to come to terms with his own impending death. These dueling themes of hope and grief finally collide in the series' 4th issue, when contact with black kryptonite twists the hero into an inversion of everything he stands for. If All-Star's earlier issues are a celebration of Superman as an ideal, issue number 4 separates that ideal from the man behind it, using Jimmy's POV to show the hero fully overcome by the tragedies in his life. Whiteley's art builds even further on this sense of doom, keeping everything in a series of tight talking heads until Superman starts to literally tower over his friend through wider tableaus, a great visual indicator that something is very wrong.
It's that signal watch. Like I don't have enough to do without bailing you out of some scrape every other day. You'd be dead without me.
Superman? That rock. It did something, didn't it?
It's just cheap moon base furniture. Quintum's loaded anyway. Think about it. I probably increased its sale value with my autograph.
Okay.
Everything's gone opposite. Jimmy, I know what Black K does. It makes me bad. And you know what? Part of me is starting to like that idea.
Kryptonite has been used countless times to humanize Superman over the decades, usually by just taking his powers away. But through the larger story of All-Star, it takes on a more universal, relatable meaning, becoming a symbol of the hopelessness that makes even the strongest of us give in to our worst impulses. In sharp contrast to the incorruptible ideal of before, Superman becomes a violent monster, lashing out at the people around him, complete with speech bubbles that darken as he sinks further and further into his own self-doubt. But while Morrison uses hopelessness to deconstruct the ideal of Superman, they also use it to empower his pal, elevating Jimmy from passive observer to someone inspired to do good in the hero's name. Desperate to stop his friend before he hurts someone, Jimmy takes on his own monstrous transformation, mutating himself into the one being strong enough to stop Superman in his tracks: Doomsday.
Cool.
The issue's climactic fistfight, for all its spectacle, is a moment that's surprisingly human, as both characters start to lose themselves in their transformations, a great metaphor for the confusion and anger that comes when dealing with grief. Quitely's hyper-detailed pencils perfectly sell the tragic chaos of the scene, imbuing every punch with an immense heft that damages the story's two leads as well as the streets around them. But while Superman's self-destructive behavior fully consumes him, literally sapping his strength as the fight drags on, Jimmy manages to keep himself anchored with his unshakable faith in his friend, symbolized through the indestructible bond of his Superman signal watch. Even when all seems lost, it's friendship and decency that's able to bring Superman back. In typical Silver Age fashion, everything's back to normal by the end, with Jimmy even reiterating that Superman's failings aren't what define him. It's easy to brush this off as filler between more important moments, but through this one issue, Morrison and Quitely completely redefine the relationship between Superman and his pal, and why they're both so important to each other. Nobody is impervious enough to take on life's tragedies alone. Even our heroes lose their way sometimes, but that doesn't mean there isn't a way through it all. Sometimes, all it takes is for us to step up, and to be a pal to those in need. Happy Jimuary, everyone, and thanks for checking out this latest video. I've always been a big fan of All-Star Superman, and it was really fun coming back after all this time and looking at this issue in particular with a fresh perspective. I think Morrison and Quitely's take on Jimmy is brilliant and heartfelt, and leaves us with a message that we can all try to live up to in our own way. If you liked this video, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Every little bit helps the channel out a lot. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Dom DeFelice, The Comics Cave, Kirk Ireland, and my patrons, who are helping me to grow this channel and continue doing what I love, and hopefully what you love too. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a joyous Jimuary.